Hey everybody, it's Laura Kinghan. Late once again. I know I always have to say that. It's kind of like jump right in and let's be late. I'm sorry. It's one of my issues. But I hope that I make up for it in what I'd like to present with you all today. I am a nationally registered occupational therapist, and I have been since 1983. So I've been at this for well over 35 years, more than like 40. I even did some work in high school around sensory integration. Although I stay away from that term because it's a trademark term. You have to. I feel like I've had to be very careful with that. So I've been using the word sensory processing. My business is actually Sensory Solutions, Inc. And I've been in business since 2008. I've basically spent my career working with sensory processing issues, a lot with autism, and taking that a step further with people with behavioral issues related either to autism or the sensory issues. Way back when in the 80s, I worked at St. Luke's Behavioral Health Center in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was very fortunate at that time. This was like the late 80s. I had just worked with Lorna Jean King, and Ayres had been doing a lot of work about sensory integration, sensory processing. And I happened to ended up working at St. Luke's Behavioral Health Center, where they incorporated a sensory integrative perspective into the psychiatric care with the children who were inpatient psychiatric. And what I discovered is that, or what we discovered, is that a lot of those children with psychiatric issues also had sensory processing issues. And so I've basically spent my career working in merging the sensory issues with the behavioral issues. And then in the last almost 20 years, I worked for the Arizona State for the Division of Developmental Disabilities, DDD, working in individuals' homes, group homes, agencies, and the community. And it's amazing how much the sensory component, where do I want to go with that? How important the sensory component is in health. And not just for autism, but I think of somebody like, say, with a stroke. A lot of people have tactile sensory issues because the stroke has caused brain damage. And what we're doing with sensory issues is working with the brain, our five senses, including our sense of touch, but also our sense of movement. This is a neurological issue. It's a physiological issue that we're talking about. So I'm jumping right in talking about sensory issues. So let me take a little bit of back step. In my videos, I like to do an introduction, and then like a classroom portion where I introduce concepts, and then we do a lab portion where there's active participation. And because self-regulation has been so important, especially with sensory processing, but also with emotional regulation, I like to emphasize. My sessions, we start out, kind of even keel, and then I present, and we're going to build in our energy level. And then it's going to kind of heighten, and then we're going to calm back down. So it's going to be up and back down, because that's what we do in our day. We start out slow, we kind of build, after that cup of coffee, we're kind of like, okay, now we're going to get going. And then we kind of peak during the day, middle of the day, the sun is high in the sky, and then we come back down and we calm ourselves back down. But a lot of people who have the sensory processing issues have trouble with that, or emotional issues where, there's a lot of anger that's been going on these days. Where does anger control come in, and where do we lose it? If you kind of build and you get really angry and then you're unable to calm yourself back down, and if you just let your anger go, it could be a problem. So I want to just talk a little bit about this introduction, talk about some concepts about sound. And then I've asked my husband, Kevin Kinghan, he is a drummer, to help us in our lab portion, where we're going to experiment with some different kinds of sound. Part of the reason why I chose this topic today is because the guitar player in my husband's band, the Vanderveer Breaks, Eric Carafino, spent a lot of time last week during spring break offering free music lessons to the community. And I was fortunate to pay attention because there was a lot of concepts that he presented that was helpful for me as an occupational therapist. And Eric and I have talked, my husband and I have talked. He's definitely been involved in a lot of our live demo sessions. Because my husband is a drummer and he's connected to a band, these guys, how do I want to say, in and of their own selves, there is so much therapeutic value in music. And so Eric is available to me to work with me in my sessions, like on a one-to-one basis. We already work together. And I want to highlight why we would want to do that. I want to highlight that in this session. My husband Kevin with the drums, he's been helping out with more of like this community type of an approach. What I've been wanting to do is offer drum circles to the community, music circles, but we're struggling with the internet connection. So that's something that I definitely want to pursue. But in the meantime, we still have this incredibly huge wealth of therapeutic value in the drum kit and with what musicians can bring to the table. And so I'd like to experiment with that a little bit today. Before I get much more into the real concept, just to let you all know, I am licensed by the state of Arizona to practice occupational therapy. And in this pandemic time, I have felt the calling to offer these live demos to you, certainly from an educational standpoint, so you get to understand who I am and how I work, why I do what I do. But I am available. I opened a clinic in January of 2020. I haven't had much business there. But what I've done is now I've stepped up and started this telehealth practice. So I am available for individual sessions, group sessions. You can go to Facebook. That's really my main working site. Go to SSIFB, Sensory Solutions Inc. FB, and you can find lots of information there. If you go to YouTube, you can go at SSI TUBEOT. So Sensory Solutions Inc. Tube OT. At 2:30 on Wednesdays, I do offer a sensory group. It's like a Q&A. I'm offering it really reasonably, $35. There's financial issues, talk to me. But to be able to present or to offer group opportunities for people to learn from me and from one issues, because I think it's such a huge issue. Not just for autism, but there's lots of neurological problems that can cause sensorial issues, sensory issues. As an occupational therapist, I do tend to focus a little less on sound historically when I'm talking about trying to integrate senses. But it is highly important. And to emphasize, when I work with a client, I want to do an individual evaluation in order to determine what their strengths and weaknesses are and what are we trying to work on to develop an individual treatment plan for that particular person, to know what their strengths and weaknesses are and what to highlight. And I may allude to that later as well. But it's very important as an occupational therapist to know who my client is and what their skills and abilities are and their propensities, because it's important to individualize. I use the term, I talked about like aromatherapy, like with vanilla. I don't like vanilla. A lot of people do. You know, it's really important to be careful about generalizing. If one person likes it, doesn't necessarily mean another person does. You know, loud sounds could actually be it could hurt somebody who, say, is hypersensitive. So knowing those character issues with each individual is important to drive what I'm going to do in therapy and why. So I'm going to use this as my segue into more of the classroom part. I mean, why auditory? Why do we want to work with sound? There are so many reasons why we would want to work with sound. I mean, what does sound do for us? You know, I hear a sound and I want to localize. Is it something pleasant? Or is there a safety issue? Like, you know, I live right by the highway. You know, I can hear those sounds and, you know, sirens go by, it's informing me. And there's a safety issue. I'm gonna go ahead and do this. I'm gonna flip this around. I do have 2 iPads going. Let's do one. I want to show you this book, Sensory Integration in the Child by Ayres. Still here. This is a book that I'm going to switch it over to on the other iPad. There's the book. Sensory Integration in the Child by Ayres. Oops. Oh, shoot. So this was like a really... I'm going to flip this around again because I want to show you a page from this book. I'm going to do it on one iPad and then I'll do it on the other iPad. I've alluded to this particular chart before, where it talks about the basic sensory systems, but it also includes auditory. So I'm going to flip this around, and then I'm going to do it on the other iPad. It's the best I can do with the technology that I have for right now. So much of the sensory processing or sensory integrative approach is working with these different sensory systems and exaggerate it. Once I've done my evaluation, I determine the treatment, determine what kinds of areas that I want to focus on, and then I develop my treatment. So using this particular chart that now is going to look backwards to you all, you know, we have the auditory up here. And how really the auditory goes right to that speech and language. That so much of our auditory processing informs us with our languaging. And then how does that guide us in our social interactions? So hearing has a lot to do with our socialization. But what happens if somebody has a problem? Either they're deaf and they can't hear at all, or because of whatever's going on in their brain, maybe there's an auditory processing issue. So what happens if somebody's auditory processing system is inadequate? That could be a cause for referral, certainly to possibly an audiologist or a speech and language therapist, but also as an occupational therapist, possibly. Or an occupational therapist could be part of the team to help treat that client. Just some other notes that I was putting this all together last night, and it's like there's so much that we can do and talk about with the auditory. In fact, it's like, which way do we want to go with this? And so let me just talk about a couple other reasons why our hearing is so vital to us. Like I alluded to before about safety, it does prepare us. Another thought is, I think a perfect example is any of you who have pets. When you go to work and then come home, you know, the animal is listening and can hear that car and knows when you're coming home. I mean, it's so informative about our interactions with others. I guess another point I want to make is about discernment, and hearing different types of sound is also important, and we're going to talk about that later when we get to tone. So I guess I'm kind of skipping around a little bit. I apologize. So if somebody has a hearing issue or some kind of auditory processing issue, they could be referred to me as an occupational therapist. It could be part of a larger picture of issues. If there are issues with auditory processing, what are some of the challenges that could present to a particular individual? Obviously, we've already talked about speech and language issues. If you have a hearing issue, there may be some speech and language issues, maybe not. It depends on how well that person is functioning. There could be overall academic issues. Being able to listen to a teacher, being able to differentiate between the sounds, a B and a P. My business, Sensory Solutions, S, it's an odd sound, right? But to be able to differentiate that sound from something else. If there's an auditory issue, there could be learning problems. Like, for example, patterning. Being able to differentiate between the different sounds and then patterning those different sounds. And that's where I think a lot of the dyslexia can come in. You might see that, and how much maybe sound has to do with that or not. There could be issues on disorganization, sequencing. One of the newer terms is interoception. And that to me goes along with the wellness arena. How many of you can tune in and hear your own body? Talking with my husband last night, he was the one that even mentioned, listening to your own heartbeat. Can you do that? Can you get quiet enough and feel into your own body and feel what your body, listen to your body? I mean, that gets into all kinds of possibilities of being quiet enough to listen and hear. And to me, I smile because I think of intuition. I mean, really taking it to the nth degree, listening to what is going on around you. That's a whole nother subject that I really don't want to get into today. But other than just to state, the power of listening can be informative about yourself. It can be informative about your self-awareness or body awareness. My husband was even talking about having stereo sound, hearing out of one versus another, and how that informs us. Maybe hearing, it could even be a safety issue like danger, of hearing something far away. By being able to have not one but two ears can help, again, be discerning in giving you information on that sound, how far away that sound is, and is that sound dangerous? The qualities. I do want to just briefly talk about the difference between hyper and hyposensitivity. And I think that that's true not just for the auditory processing, but for all the senses. That certainly people that I work with have a tendency to either be like hypo or hyper responsive. They can take just a very little bit of sound and it can really escalate them. Or a hypo responsive person needs a lot of sound and a lot of to like really make a difference. And so when I'm working with my client, I need to know those kinds of things. And that's going to inform me, because if my client is really hypersensitive, I want to be really careful, because I may lose them if I do too much. And sound is such a great way to help address ampage and self-regulation and the sensitivities. In a previous video, I talked about performance components. And one of the reasons why I do music and why I've done slot cars and the sensory is because it's kind of archetypal. It's a universal. These are different areas that offer such an incredible wealth of activity potential. And so that's why I've chosen these different kinds of activities or different kinds of modalities. Music can offer so many different kinds of things. Well, I guess that'll be my segue. So again, in preparation for this, in talking about the different types of performance components, or really the performance components for an individual, is different than what an activity can provide. An activity, what I do as a therapist is I do an activity analysis. And so I pick an activity, say like music, and I match I do an activity analysis, and I look at the different kinds of issues, the different skill areas that music can offer. And then I match it to my clients' performance components, the issues that they're having. And I mean, to me, this is the art of therapy, is to make that match, what my clients' needs are to what the activity can provide, or how can I structure the activity to match those performance components. Like the biggest bang for the buck. So music can offer a lot. The slot cars can offer a lot. It's a hobby. But these aren't for everybody. And that's why as occupational therapists, we have a bag of tricks, so to speak. And why the evaluation is important, so that I can know what my clients' needs and interests are for motivation, to motivate them to engage in the therapeutic process, to address those performance components, to help improve their functioning. Because that's why I'm treating them in the first place, right? Is to improve independent functioning, basically. So what are some of those things that music can offer? It's a lot. So one of the things that Eric was talking about that I really kind of jumped on, because some of that stuff is way over my head even, but it's just about flow. And when we talk about energy, I've just really been big on flow. And so some of the things that we're going to present today with Kevin, I want you to keep some of these different concepts in mind, is what about flow? If I have a psychiatric client that has a lot of erratic behavior, up and down and all around, and they're having a hard time, they don't get grounded really well, they get explosive, how can I use music to address those issues? And I mean, it might be steering into some of that erratic behavior, and I may want to use kind of an angular approach to the music, steering into more of a flow and kind of helping my client guide that erratic behavior into more of a flow to help them in their functioning. I mean, that's a dramatic example, but that's how powerful I think music can be. Timing is another example. Clearly, I have issues with timing. By working with timing and like with rhythm, can be informative to a client and can help with certain skill development. The Native Americans talk about the heartbeat, the drum, that constant drumming relates to our heartbeat. And that rhythm and that regularity literally helps our heart, right? I mean, in Western, our average America, we kind of poo-poo a lot of that stuff. But from an energetic standpoint, the power of that is huge. And if we can spend regular times in that regularity, it may actually help us in our day-to-day routines and life, that predictability. And heaven knows in our day-to-day these days, a lot of things are not predictable. And so when we have music, I want to jump right, and I want to talk about organization. An organized piece of music can actually maybe offer some comfort in a time when things are very unpredictable. When you can anticipate, it can be comforting even just to the nervous system. Speed. A lot of my clients have issues with speed. Again, angular. You can go too fast or too slow, or We can work with music to help build and develop muscles that relate to regularity and rhythm and predictability. Even a term that my husband used was volume, and having volume in sound. So much of what I work with is modulation, and you can use sound to help you in modulating, and we're going to get to that. One other comment that I made note of is taking note to how culture can impact sound. Even spiritual considerations can impact sound. I think of like a Nova Scotia drinking song, and how that's different, like, or that Scottish sound is different than, say, a religious song, and how that can inform us and can inform us emotionally. That music can impact us in so many different ways. So much of what I've been kind of alluding to, I think, talks about more like academic kind of skills, because that's so much of what I'm working with a client. But music can impact us culturally, spiritually, and again, those social implications. There's just so many different kinds of things that we can do with sound. It's really quite amazing. But time is moving on. And I want to get into more of the practical stuff. So I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to ask Kevin to illustrate some different principles, different activities, different kinds of musical techniques. And let's talk about a couple of these different things and why I might want to use these kinds of things in therapy. And then we'll do a little bit of quiet time, and I've asked Kevin to help us with that. So I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to move the iPad over so that you can see the drum kit. I'm going to step out of the picture, but I'm going to talk us through some different things. And then when we get to quiet time, I encourage you to kind of think ahead. We'll probably take about 7 minutes for quiet time. Kevin's going to work the kit and really accentuate sound for us. But when I talk about sensory processing, I alluded to before, we really want to accentuate or exaggerate the sensory mechanisms in a therapeutic session. So I am probably not just going to focus on sound, but do other kinds of things in therapy. So for this quiet time activity, think about the other sensory systems. Most people tend to respond to deep pressure as calming. So maybe cuddle up in some cushions. I like beanbag chairs. I know that's very, 70s. Maybe get a heavy blanket. Or if you know yourself well enough that movement is more calming for your nervous system, because we want to make an impact on the nervous system. Find something that will help you to move back and forth, but make it rhythmical, like a rocking chair. But try to do as little effort, take as little effort as possible. Because what I'd like you to do in that mindful quality is tune inside to your body. Let me backtrack. Get yourself in a comfortable position so that you don't have to do anything external, so that you can just listen and tune in. And let the sounds and what you're feeling be informative to you. Just take note rather than attach to that. Just listen. And then see what that does to your nervous system. Because the idea, even though this is just a demo, is my intent is that you all still have some kind of, that this can have some kind of an effect on you as well. So I think that's all I really want to say. So let's move into the lab portion. And I want to talk just a hair about vibration, because vibration is just so much. I have these tingshaws, and how many of you have seen these and wondering what the heck? Now, I've had a very fortunate opportunity to work with some Tibetan monks, some Bunpo, and how I've been taught to use these. And it's really fun to use these in therapy because there is a fine motor quality to these, and we all use vibration. I mean, vibration works with us. But vibration is actually more of a vestibular system mechanism. Uh-oh. Oh my goodness. I haven't used these in a while. So much for my little demo here. Whoops. Well, I wasn't expecting that. So, let's see if I can fix this while I'm talking. Vibration is actually detected through the vestibular system, which is in our inner ear, which is right next to the hearing mechanism. So there is a strong auditory quality, but it's vibration and it's vestibular. So if I'm working with somebody who has vestibular issues, I may actually use a lot of vibration. So let me show you. So I'm holding them like this, and then kind of at like a 45-degree angle like this. I'm going to tap it. So there's some vibration with this. But fortunately, we have some cymbals and a whole drum kit, and we can take this to the nth degree. So, still spend too much time talking. I'm going to set these up, and I'm going to switch that iPhone around and bring it over to the drum kit, and then I'm going to have Kevin, I'm going to ask him to start out with a drum roll. There's so much to talk about. So, Kevin, I'm going to cue you. Hold on, everybody. I don't think I can do this. Oops. Just bear with me, everybody. This is as high tech as I can get. So Kevin, while I still set these up, if you would do a drum roll, and I would like you all just to go ahead and listen and see what this will do for you. And I want him to build that in intensity and in sound. So how does that feel? Can you feel the vibration still kind of like humming? The vibration is still kind of humming from that. So depending on what I'm trying to work with my client, we can work on speed, control, whether my client is actually doing the music themselves or they're listening to the music. But then I might want to have some kind of motor response. Maybe have them do some kind of movement in response to what they're hearing. Kevin, would you please illustrate for us with a symbol? Again, this is something that I learned from Eric last week about like crescendo, like building up and then building back down. So we want to start kind of like with a drum roll. We're going to start slow, build it up, and then come back down. So build it up, really, really loud. And slow, and then stop. So depending on what I want to work with my client, this might be something else. One of the issues that we have with clients, with kids, is auditory discrimination or discernment. And there's lots of ways we can address that through the music. Kevin, let's talk about rhythm. If you would do a very simple, basic rhythm with the drumsticks, just like go ahead. Have you ever noticed in your life that your life can be patterned? I think that's one of the troubles of today, is that our normal patterns have been disrupted. So how much, by listening to, hop in here, how much is listening to some music bringing back some predictability? But what if I have a problem with, working with a client who has some rhythm issues? This would be a great way, working with a drummer, to address that. And there's so many different ways. I may want to replicate the pattern with him. I may want to have my client build off this pattern. I may want to make it a simpler pattern. I may want to make it a more complex pattern. There's lots of choices. So there's one other area that I'd like to talk about, and that's tone, if we may. So Kevin, if you go ahead and ease off the rhythm. Would you take one of your toms, maybe start with a higher tom, and just, let's not even do a rhythm, but just play the tone. And play it a couple of times so we can hear that sound. Now pick a different tom to show, play two different toms, just two different tones. And then go back to the original one. And then back to the other one. And then go ahead and stop. So let's say, for example, one of the things I work with a lot is with academics, is teaching basic patterning. Especially dyslexic children who get B's and D's and Q's mixed up. There's so much with the patterning that taking the drum kit or sounds and working on simple patterning and then build on that pattern can actually help kind of open the brain up for that academic learning. So music in this kind of way can be very supportive to the academic learning. But with the thing of sound, there is so much that we can do, and I'm running out of time here. So I have said that I would like to do some quiet time. So go ahead and get yourselves comfortable. I'm going to resituate the iPads, and in the meantime, I'm going to ask Kevin to go ahead and start our quiet time. I've asked him to play his toms, so go ahead, get yourself comfortable, and once you get in that place, comfort, not yet, okay, sorry, get yourself comfortable, take a couple of deep breaths in and out, and let yourself settle, and then we'll cue the music, okay? So if you would start at like the higher noted tom, and then just work your way down the kit, okay? And we'll even get, I love the cymbals, so we'll end up with the cymbals too, okay? So enjoy. So Kevin, cue the music, go ahead if you would start. What do the different notes feel like for you? How does that speed feel for you? How does that rhythm feel for you? Is it too much? Is it not enough? Go ahead and take another deep breath in and out. As we wind down. It seems like time goes pretty quick, but hopefully it's just right. The timing. Sound can offer so much, and so hopefully my voice is a good sound. Thank you for joining in, and May you be touched in a good way because of the time that we've taken today. So, take good care. Have a good